Okay, hey everybody. I hope that this is looks like it is recording. I hope it's recording. I am not in the ocean, the beach. Would like to be, but this is a picture that is not a stock picture. This is an actual picture taken from a vacation I had a year ago in the BVI, which is the British Virgin Islands. And yeah, this is kind of where I was at. It was private and it was beautiful every day, and there's only 200 people at this island. It's called Anegada. I would highly suggest going there sometime, or at least the British Virgin Islands, or at least the US Virgin Islands. It's a great getaway, and I miss it. Wish I was there right now. Okay. All right. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Okay. So, so I posted in a document last week, or maybe it might have been the weekend before. Anyway, I posted that document, and there's been a few changes to that. And the reason, and that's what I'm going to go over today real quick, the reason why is that as we proceed in this format through the semester, I have to make adjustments based on everyone's schedule and what makes more sense. Okay, so things kind of start coming together a little bit more, and I start seeing a bigger picture. And so I want to make sure this is as as seamless as possible. Okay, so what is happening in this class? All right, so first of all, you know this already, but exam 2 is not tomorrow. It's been moved to a week, for another week. So it's actually April 9th. I'll open it up the day before, okay? And it'll close on the 9th at the end of the day. So you have all that time to take the test, okay? The test study guide will be available later today. It's just about completed, but and it might not have every single topic listed on there, but it'll have enough that you should be okay. Yes, and so you see, it's 120 points for the test. So I believe that there will be 30 questions. So 30 multiple choice questions. So the 30 multiple choice questions will be based on the topics, right, from the study guide, but will not necessarily be verbatim. Okay, just like last time, there's not as many, there's a few definitional questions, but most of them are application questions. And so, we can spend a little bit of time next week, if you want to ask me some things about the study guide, that would be fine. Maybe we can set up a little Zoom meeting or something, but it'll be the same type of test as we had the first time around. So if it's worth 120 points and there's 30 questions, that means that there are each question is worth 4 points. Okay. Let's see. Is that all for the test? Okay. So yeah. So I just want to clarify this. All right. And I did have one question about it. So as you know, in order to make it a little more lenient for you in this crazy time, every assignment and project will have a grace period of 7 days. So you have up to 7 days past the due date. All right, but that goes for just assignments and projects, okay, not participation. All right, so you can't just wait a week after participation and have like 1 or 2 lectures and just like do, reply. I expect that your replies will come by the end of the week. Okay, so it doesn't have to come on Tuesdays or Thursdays. It can, as long as you get it done by the end of the week. What I have a grader for this class, and so what we will do is, on Saturday, okay, we'll go through and just give you those participation points, okay? Or as we go through, so if those of you who have the participation points already and reply earlier than Friday, then we'll enter those in. But Friday night is the very last time that you can post your reply for that week. Okay, so I want to focus on the participation thing. Okay, so here are the requirements. So for example, you must reply to this announcement for 10 participation points. All right. And so I will try to post lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I just, like, I'm affording you some leniency. I have to have some leniency as well. So I will really do my best to post 2 lectures as close to Tuesday and Thursday as possible. A lecture might be like today, we're going to go over some content, all right? Or a lecture might be just, you know, talking about some housekeeping stuff, maybe looking at, I don't know, examples of upcoming projects or answering questions of projects, that type of thing. So that would be a lecture as well. But each of these are going to be posted, each lecture will be posted in an announcement, just like we talked about before. And you just have to reply to those by Friday, the end of the day on Friday. Okay. And by the end of the day, I hope you guys know that that's 11:59 p.m., not midnight. Okay. But 11:59 p.m. So your reply, for the participation needs to be done by then. Okay. You don't have the 7 days grace period for that. What else? Oh, yes. Do I have that on it? Okay. So if it's not posted until Wednesday, for example, you can still respond by Friday. You will still receive participation points even if it's not Tuesday or Thursday, but as long as it's Friday. Okay. Sometimes, like the lecture last week, participation includes a follow-up activity that is required for the 10 points. Okay. So please be mindful of this. If you only reply to the announcement for your participation points, but you don't have the activity completed in the, in the text box, you will not receive any points for that. Okay, you will receive 0 points for that participation. So a handful of you only replied, okay, last week, and it was very clear on the PowerPoint, especially at the very end, that you would have a little writing exercise, okay? So you have to be mindful of that. You have to look for that, all right? This is not a time to miss, especially easy points, right? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm gonna, no, let me just keep plowing ahead. So I just did a little screenshot of the stuff that is coming up in April. So this actually is the last things that we have due this semester. Okay, so your observation activity, I have all of the information either on the document that I sent out a week ago Sunday, or it's actually on here. Okay, so click on here and then go to, it'll take you to the assignment, and then you'll see the due date, and you'll see the document that's included will be explain in detail what is expected. Just a little overview, the observation activity cannot be done in like a preschool or a situation where there's a bunch of people. Okay, so instead I'm going to ask you to view a YouTube video that mimics a group of people in one particular stage of development. Okay, here's exam 2. And then the reason I put nothing is due today right here is because I couldn't change it. For some reason, Loud Club would not let me change it. So, it says due already, so I just put nothing's due today. There was something due today, a while ago, but I couldn't change it. Okay. So your developmental chart is due on the 19th as well as your developmental, I'm sorry. Developmental periods, and let me just pull that up again. You guys can make it bigger. And then exam 3 will actually be due on the 23rd, okay, which is really close to the end. And then you have one more project, which is issues on dying. And again, you can read that information about those details as well. And that is it, my friends. Okay, so who knows? There might be little tweaks here or there, but that's essentially what we're looking at until the end of the semester. Okay. Okay, so so I want to talk about something called self-efficacy in adolescence. And self-efficacy is a very well-known and important concept in psychology and educational psychology, developmental psychology, cognitive psychology, social learning theory or social cognitive theory. One of the things about self-efficacy is that it correlates to so many variables. All right. And when you have a concept that correlates to so many variables, then it becomes a very valid concept. And, somehow it's really essential in our behavior and our ways of thinking about ourselves that, it warrants a lot of research. And there has been lots of research in, the past, I don't want to say like 70 years or so. Okay, so theoretically, let's look at the theoretical model here. I'm just going to make this bigger. Okay. So the theoretical model is the social learning theory, or you could also call it the social cognitive theory. So this theory postulates that human functioning results from interactions among personal factors like cognitions, okay, the way that we think, all right, the way that we perceive things, the way that we what we believe about things, emotions, behaviors, and of course environmental conditions. So again, we run into some of these questions about nature versus nurture. Okay, so where do these actually come from? Okay, most likely a social learning theorist is going to say the environmental conditions, but it's not always the case. There are some things that are just biological. Okay, but the question is, do we operate on our environment? Can we change our own environment, or does our environment change us? Okay, we usually would say, well, our environment actually shapes who we are, but do we have the control to change the environment in which we live? So that's an important question when we're looking at the social learning theory. Okay, so here, Bandura, actually Albert Bandura, was the very prolific author, researcher on social learning theory, and is, cited millions of times. So social learning theory approaches the explanation of human behavior, psychology, in terms of a continuous reciprocal interaction between cognitive, behavioral, and environmental determinants. So we are looking at these, these variables, but not just the variables in a vacuum. We're looking at each one and their interaction, and it's a dynamic interplay among all of these. So if this is human behavior, all right, or in other words, you could say that this is you, because what is the difference between who you are and how you behave? That was a very dramatic pause for you to think about it. Okay, so cognitive factors. This could be also referred to as personal factors. So this would be like the knowledge that you have, the expectations you have about yourself, about others, about certain situations or tasks, and the attitudes you have about those tasks. Okay. The environmental factors would be like social norms. So we have certain social norms, and if we follow those, then usually we're accepted. If we don't follow those, then you're not conforming, you're nonconformist, and there's certain beliefs about that. Influence on others, so your ability to change your own environment. So are you able to have an influence on others to the extent that your environment can also change? Environment, what does that mean? Environment can mean the people around you. Do you have an influence on changing their thought process, their behavior, their attitudes? Environment can be your family. Okay. Do you have any influence on maybe changing some of the thought patterns or behaviors of family, friends, and relationships? But it doesn't have to be people. It can be an overall, say like an organization, or uh, just the overall cultural beliefs of a certain, a certain subgroup, or like I said, organization, or even a Facebook group, right? So we can take individuals, but if we put them together in a collective environment, can you actually influence the behaviors, the thought processes, the attitudes, the social norms, the even skill sets of people in a large group? Okay. So then you have the behavioral factors, and this would be like the skills that you have. And I have a little bone to pick about this particular model. I understand why skills would be in part of a behavioral factor. Skills would involve, like a skill set. So if you have a skill in tennis, okay, that is going to lead to certain behaviors. So if you have a high level of skill for playing tennis, then you're going to probably be successful in tennis. You also are probably going to, you're also going to practice, okay, tennis, and therefore you're going to have higher self-efficacy. These are all kind of related, but skills can also be thought of as like more of a biological factor, not necessarily just a behavioral factor. But for the sake of this, let's go with skills. Some of these are subjective. Cognitive factors like knowledge, expectations of what's going to happen, like schema, your attitudes, your do you have certain self-beliefs, and how do you react on that? Do you have attitudes about certain groups of people? How does that affect your behavior? And then how does that maybe affect your the environmental factors around you? Okay. So all of that determines human behavior, and you can see that these arrows are recursive, so it can bounce back and forth, back and forth. So let's see. Okay, so we know with coronavirus that there are some people who ignore some of the mandates. For example, they hang out in big crowds, right? They go to parties. They hang out at beaches together. Churches, okay? People who believe that, it's, God's will if you will get coronavirus or not. But in the meantime, it's important to honor God and to be together to worship. Okay, so let's take you know, spring breakers who were on the beaches, okay, touching and running around together and, you know, doing many other things, okay, basically being together. So, so essentially, we have this influence on others, all right? So it just takes a few people to say, it doesn't matter. We're young. Doesn't matter. We're not going to get it. We just want to have fun because we, you know, we worked hard at school and we deserve to have the spring break and this party time. So, you know, so they will start to have that access and community and maybe even change and convince people that it's okay and don't listen to the media. And, you know, I think this is still going to be fine. We're the United States. We can do anything we want. So we might influence others, and that can actually change the environment. And in this case, maybe it's just the environment of, you know, our friends, or maybe it's, you know, a group, an online group. Maybe it's just, you know, work friends or work people, who knows? But somehow you can influence people to think that it's okay. All right. And we know that coming from the federal level, that, you know, everything has kind of been topsy-turvy and uncertain. And so people really aren't sure what to do. So there's that. Okay. So then our attitude toward the coronavirus, you know, if we have people telling us, it's okay, you can go out, our attitude will say, okay, well, they said we could go out, so we're going to go out. And, you know, who cares? Okay. Those of you who are like huddled up inside, you're worried too much about it. So, so we expect that, you know, nothing will really happen, and we perceive that ourselves as being invincible in some way. So our behavioral factors are that we, I guess, are going to use social skills, if you want to, you know, talk about skills, that we practice. When I say practice, in this case, we might, you know, we're continuing to be social, right? So we're going to practice this. We're going to get on planes together. We're going to go to dinner together. We're going to share rooms together, et cetera, et cetera. So we're sort of practicing. In other words, our behavior is continuous. All right. And the more continuous behavior you have, this more stronger you make your attitudes and knowledge about situation, which means the more cohesive the social norms are in your group, and then your influence on others. Okay. So, you know, we could come up with examples, anything that would be inclusive in this model, which actually I forgot to mention is called reciprocal determinism. It's reciprocal interaction. Okay, so so once maybe a few people do contract coronavirus, then we might have a different way of thinking, or different attitudes. Okay, different expectations about our own health, and that might change our behaviors. So then if we decide, okay, we need to self-quarantine, we might say, you know what, I'm self-quarantining, I think you really need to do this. And you get a bunch of people that agree, yeah, that's a better idea. And then all of a sudden your attitude changes, and back and forth. Okay, so it can be very complex, but this is essentially what determines who we are. Okay, determines who we are, and then how that leads to what we do. Okay, you can't measure what we're thinking, okay, in our belief system, and our, you know, how we influence others or persuade others a certain way. We can't have all of these without behavior. All right. So if we believe that coronavirus is not going to get us, and our community believes that as well, it becomes a social norm. It becomes sort of, you become an outcast if you don't believe it. Okay, and all of that is fine, but we can't. But then behavior is how that manifests itself. And if you remember back to Skinner and the operant conditionist and behaviorism, that is how we measure what we're thinking or our attitudes. Okay, so anyway, so traits, environment, behavior all interact, influence each other. Okay, but I want to talk about self-efficacy. So you notice that self-efficacy was highlighted here, and that's really the point of this thing. So self-efficacy refers to subjective judgments of one's capabilities to organize and execute courses of action to attain designated goals. Okay, so essentially it's our self-perception of our own abilities. Sorry, let me back up. It's our self-perception of our own capabilities, okay, to not only do something well, but be able to plan how we're going to do it and then do it, okay, in order to attain a goal. All right. So I will say that usually when we talk about self-efficacy, originally it was developed in the context of learning. All right. So if we think we are good at math, all right, we see ourselves as good at math, then, you know, anytime where we have a new math class, we plan ahead, we see, okay, this is what we need to do for this math class. We execute those behaviors in order to attain goals. And so people who really believe that they can do this tend to do it. All right, reach those goals of, you know, maybe getting an A in the class. So one of the key mediator variables to self-efficacy and behavior is that those with self-efficacy tend to participate more readily, work harder, persist longer when they encounter difficulties, and achieve at higher levels. So again, say I'm in a math class, I have high self-efficacy that I can do well. All right, I enjoy it. So if I have set these goals that I'm going to do well, and I set the goals because I really believe that you know I will do well, then that person, me, say, will participate more readily. So asking questions of the teacher, going to office hours, seeking out questions in other places, other sources like the internet or like documentaries, other books, things like that. And this is actually really important right here. It's all important, but this one is especially interesting because persistence. So this happens a lot where we work hard, we want to do well, we set our goals, but when we run into an obstacle, say like we fail a test, okay, it's like, whoa, that takes us back. All right. But instead of just giving up, people who have high self-efficacy persist longer. So it's about persistence. It's about, okay, here was a failure. This is a bump in the road. I'm not going to just kind of retreat into my shell. I'm not going to have avoidant behavior. I'm actually going to keep going and persist until I reach my goal. Okay. So usually this happens when we are intrinsically motivated, right? That we're doing it for ourselves and that we will keep going and keep going until we get to that level, all right? So it's a belief about what a person can do rather than personal judgments about one's physical or personality attributes. So it is a belief, and sometimes we even talk about it as a subjective judgment about what you can do, what you're capable of doing, okay? It's not a belief based on your personality, based on your, you know, physical attributes, based on your ability, okay? It's just a belief about what you can do. It's a belief about what you can do, all right? And so many times we might believe that we can do something, all right? But we don't follow through. Why? Because we judge ourselves, okay? So we judge ourselves, right? Why? Because of things that the environment might tell us. All right, or experiences that we've had. I'm actually gonna go ahead and get this little pen here. So, right, so this is really important. Personal judgments or judgments outside of ourselves, okay? This is not self-efficacy. This is kind of like when you go on Facebook or I guess Instagram or Twitter and there's, you know, a lot of shaming happening, okay? So maybe you do, okay, let's talk about that. So maybe you do believe, all right, I need to lose some weight. I can come up with a plan. You know, I can come up with a way to organize and figure out steps to reach my goal, which might be to lose weight. And then I can do that. I know that I have time. I know I have the confidence. I know I have the efforts and just the grit, right, to get to attain my goal of losing weight. All right. Sadly, this happens too often, is that a belief like I can lose weight, I can do it, I know how to get there, I feel like I feel like I can, if I have an obstacle, if I, oh my God, I just ate an ice cream sundae, well, you know what, tomorrow I'm gonna eat a lot more vegetables than usual, okay? So, you know, instead of just going, oh, I ate too much ice cream, I'm done, forget it, I can't do this. Then saying, okay, I'm going to exercise more tomorrow, or, you know, eat good stuff for the rest of the week. That said, if we believe that we can do it, it's very difficult to be in an environment that can be judgmental. And here's where we go back to the social learning theory, right? Where we see that the environment can actually determine our own behavior. So social norms, access in community, influence on others, all of that can determine who we are. So this maybe shaming or personal attacks on social media can affect knowledge about ourselves or about, you know, diets, expectations that maybe we can or can't do it, and then attitudes. What attitudes might we have now about ourselves and our capability of losing weight? Okay. And unfortunately, the environment can have a huge influence on self-efficacy. Okay. So self-efficacy is also context specific. So it's not really like self-esteem where you're like, okay, I like myself. I think highly of myself. I feel like I'm good at stuff, and you know, not in a cocky way, but just, you know, generally I have high self-esteem. So I can go into new situations and be able to do okay. Self-efficacy is context specific. So I might feel efficacious about in one context, but not in another. And it can be even like with my family versus my friends. And I feel like, you know, my friends really get me, and I have some efficacy for communication and for that interaction, positive interaction. But maybe I don't have a lot of self-efficacy when I'm interacting with my family, okay, for certain beliefs, right? Certain behaviors and experiences in the past. Context specific, or sorry, self-efficacy also has several dimensions such as level, generality, and strength. So the level of self-efficacy might depend on level of a particular task. Generality, how transferable of one's efficacy judgments across different tasks or activities. Okay, so there are different levels. Okay, not exactly sure how to do that. You guys probably know more than I. Okay, so I'm stuck with this. Okay, so have different levels, right? You right now could name different people, different classes, different social situations, different, you know, contexts like work, maybe. where you have sort of a high, medium, or low level of self-efficacy. You can say you work at a restaurant, your server, and so generally, okay, we can still talk about self-efficacy. Okay, if you transfer of your judgment across different tasks, so you might have a general sense of self-efficacy. You might say, okay, I've been a server in this restaurant, so my next job I also got a server position, and so I kind of am transferring that judgment of my capability to a different task. I have a friend who was a server at a restaurant for a long time, and then sort of trained, doesn't get an actual certification, but how some restaurants will actually train you specifically for their restaurant. So she trained to be a bartender. So very different tasks, but the environment kind of influenced her self-efficacy for doing those tasks, learning the bartender behavior skills, right? Skills, hello. And so that is actually the transferring of beliefs, okay, about your capabilities. Well, if that person, if my friend was in a negative, non-supportive environment at that restaurant, then that might affect her level of confidence about her capability to go and learn new skill set to be a bartender. Okay, if she has a manager that's micromanaging, if she has a manager, people that work with her that are not friendly or are judgy, okay, she might be a little hesitant about going to learn those new skills, and that would be unfortunate. And then, of course, strength, the certainty with which one can perform a specific task. So you can perform a task and feel like, oh, I can do it. But you can also go in, if you have high self-efficacy, and say, I am certain that I can do this. If you're certain, if you feel like you could transfer, some efficacy judgments across different tasks, and if you, are at a relatively high level, based, difficulty level, okay, a higher difficulty level, and you feel like you can still do it, then most likely you will. All right. So I know I'm talking a lot. This is one of my favorite concepts. This is what this is the concept that I did my dissertation on. So I, to this day, still absolutely am fascinated by it. But so context specific definitely is one of the definition, is a definition of self-efficacy, but there's different levels of that context. Okay, forcing myself to move on. Okay, so now we have characteristics, not dimensions, but characteristics. All right, so self-efficacy judgments focus on perceived capabilities to perform an activity rather than on personal or psychological traits. So we just kind of talked about that. So we're looking at perceived capabilities versus psychological traits, or versus ability. Okay. So you might say, instead of you'd say, how well can I do something? That would be self-efficacy, rather than what am I like? Okay, what am I like is very encompassing. Okay, what am I like really does put you into a category. All right, so a category of I'm good at this or I'm not good at that. I am an introvert or an extrovert. Okay, so we feel good when we're put into a category, and then we can say, well, what am I like? So a couple things. Personality wise, if you guys have taken a class where you learn about personality theory, you'll see that there are, like the big 5 personality theories. And one thing that's kind of thrown around is, one thing that's thrown around a lot is introversion versus extroversion. All right, so some people are like, I am an extrovert, I am an introvert, I am an extrovert introvert, okay, depending on the situation. So then it gets all kind of muddled. But you probably know, are you more of an introvert or extrovert? Okay, and one of the ways you figure that out is if you go to a party or you go somewhere where you're around like even 2 or 3 other people, friends in a social situation, do you feel energized by that? Okay. Or do you feel kind of like just withdrawing a little bit, like, okay, this is too much, I want to go home. So you can just, like, I know I've had situations where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go out and meet a few people, but I'd rather just kind of sit on my couch and kind of like in a rut, right? If I force myself to go out, 95% of the time, I have a good time. Okay. 95% of the time, I, have a good interaction with at least one person, and that makes me excited. And then I want to, hang out more. And so I'm energized. Maybe I'm tired at the end of the night, but I feel better than I did than when I was sitting on my couch. They say introverts, in the social realm, introverts going out might be looking forward to seeing somebody, okay, seeing friends, whatever. But then, when they get there and then, throughout the night, especially the end of the night, they're like, I just, I'm not energized by this. It kind of makes me tired and exhausted. And, I'd rather just kind of be hanging out at home or with one other person. There's a very inclusive definitions or examples, okay, which is one of the problems of looking at personality traits or characteristics, is that there's very specific characteristics. So what am I like? I'm an introvert. That's very different than how well can I do something, okay? That can vary over time. Can I do something well today? Maybe not. Can I work at it and just do it well in 2 weeks? Yeah, okay. What am I like? I guess I'm always going to be an introvert. Okay, so it kind of insinuates that we're fixed. This is fixed. Okay. Self-efficacy says, no, it's not fixed. It's incremental. You can practice, you can get better. Another characteristic of self-efficacy is that tasks are not only domain specific, but are context and task specific. So what I mean by domain specific is, like we were saying before, like being with your friends or being with your parents. Are there different attitudes or expectations or behaviors? Being in a place of worship versus being with your friends, okay? But also task specific. So, kind of task specific. So, so within, so when you're with your friends, okay, what task specific might mean is that you feel very efficacious about, like solving conflict between two people, okay, which is maybe one of the reasons why you might be in psychology, right? If you've always been good at being that middle person and you've never been on like one side of an argument and you're good at mediating that, that might tell you that you have this capability or capable of doing, of making everyone feel good, okay, and eliminating that conflict. But if you are one of the people that are having conflicts with somebody else, that could be a real problem, all right? You can mediate a conflict, but when you're in a conflict yourself, you seem to not have the skills, all right? So that's weird. That's task specific, okay? Having efficacy in one and not efficacy in another, okay? So for example, in math class, I feel capable of doing addition and subtraction, but not division and multiplication, right? Simple. And then third characteristic of self-efficacy is the dependence on a mastery criterion of performance rather than on normative or other criteria. So for example, you might say, how well can I write this essay? Okay, versus how well can I write this essay compared to my peers? So how well can I write this essay, right? If I can write it really well, that's great. I'll probably do another essay and write another essay and feel good about it. If I don't think I can write this essay well, but I have self-efficacy about it, then I'll persist until I do. How well can I write this essay compared to my peers? Well, that's a little more fixed because that's all dependent. It's all normative. It's dependent on how well your peers do. So I might be really good at writing essays, but hey, if I kind of, maybe my score in the class was like, right at 60%, that means that there's a substantial amount of people that are better writers than me. Okay, so now I don't feel so efficacious about it. And it's more likely that when you're compared to peers, or compared to other people, that you display avoidant behavior, okay, or other types of maladaptive behavior, like anger, okay, like self-shaming, okay. You get those negative thoughts circling around in your head to the point where you seem like you can't really do anything or have capability of doing anything. And that's where you start becoming helpless, right? Learned helplessness. All right. There's definitely a connection between self-efficacy and learned helplessness. So you might be asking, what are the causes of self-efficacy? You also might be asking, when is this lecture going to be over? The answer to the second question is soon. The answer to the first question is, here we go. Okay, sorry. So mastery experiences are actual performances. You can get self-efficacy by vicarious experiences or forms of persuasion or physiological reactions. Okay. So instead of going through what each of these means, I'm just going to give you a little example. So me. Okay, so let's jump back to here. So your participation today. It's worth 10 points. That means you have to reply to this announcement, and not only a reply, but you need to answer 2 questions. One, you need to provide a definition of self-efficacy in your own words. All right, so do not use Google. Do not use your the notes. I mean, use them, but do not use the same words. All right, it doesn't have to be textbooky. It doesn't have to sound scholarly, right? If you were to explain to your grandma what self-efficacy was, okay, what would you say? All right. So number 1. Number 2, think of a task in which you have high or low self-efficacy. Explain how each of the 4 sources of self-efficacy have contributed to your belief. Here's an example that I have. Hopefully it's enough to understand what these beliefs, what these sources are. I actually have high self-efficacy for baking this specific amazing homemade apple pie. It's really good. Homemade crust, everything from scratch. Why do I have high self-efficacy for this? Okay, first of all, it's task specific. I don't have high self-efficacy for cooking. I don't have high self-efficacy for, I do like baking. Is there something I don't like to bake? You know what, I like to bake everything. So, but if there's something to bake, I could talk about that as my low self-efficacy. But here's my example. I digress. So here's how I break down my belief about baking this particular pie using the 4 sources of self-efficacy. My mastery experiences, all right, means that it's stuff that I have already experienced, right, that I've done it before. So in this case, I've been successful almost every time I've made this, all right? And if I'm not successful, like 2 Thanksgivings ago, I made a pie and it wasn't quite as good, just a little bit. So I made another one, okay? So I persisted, right? Because I knew that I could have this experience. I'd done it before. I know that I can do it again, and I will have the expected outcome. Vicarious experience is when you can observe other people. Okay, you get high self-efficacy from just observing. Self-efficacy from working side by side with somebody and kind of sharing the work. And maybe one really great thing is YouTube, right? Because man, you could look up how to make an apple pie and you could get a ton of videos on that and just follow the videos. Okay, so vicarious experiences. However, vicarious experiences need, in order to get real sense of self-efficacy through vicarious experiences, if we're observing someone, that person cannot be like Rachel Ray. That person has to be, someone that has the same skill set, not a whole lot of experience, especially not professional experience, has not been to cooking school. Okay, someone who is kind of like me. Okay, so I feel like you don't always have this huge skill set already ahead of me, that we kind of have matching ones, and that if you can do it, I can do it. Persuasion. This is like verbal persuasion, social persuasion. So verbal persuasion is if people basically say, "Yum, this is great. This I've had a friend say this is the best pie I've ever had." People ask me to make it all the time, and then they praise me for it. That's verbal persuasion. Social persuasion, kind of the same thing, but like say I post this recipe on Instagram or on what is it called, Pinterest or something, and I get a lot of people saying 5 stars, this is great. That's verbal persuasion, but it's also like in a collective social situation too. That's going to give me higher self-efficacy. And then physiological response. This is kind of like classical conditioning. So my physiological response informs how my belief about how well I can accomplish this task. So when I am about to make this pie, I sincerely get excited when I make it or when I'm about to make it. So I don't feel anxious. I don't kind of have heart palpitations unless it's like for excited heart palpitations. I get excited. All right. And I get energized and I geek out, in other words. So that's my physiological response. That informs me that this is something that I enjoy and that I have capability of doing. I have a high sense of self-capability or self-efficacy. So in your example, you can, talk about something you have high self-efficacy for or low self-efficacy for. Okay. And then just kind of like this, you don't have to make it like a long, drawn out paper. You can just kind of make a list of this stuff. All right. And I think that's going to be really interesting to know. If we had enough time, if we had, class in person, we'd probably share some of these, because I think it would be a really cool discussion. But anyway, that's not where we're at right now. Okay. So here's the deal. I don't know how long this took, a lot longer for just 5 slides, but I have to tell you, I am so very excited about this particular concept. So I don't know, probably lasted much longer than I expected. So for your sake and sanity, I will not post another lecture on Thursday, but I might post, maybe a couple clarifications of some things on the study guide or something like that. So it'll be something. So I'll post something and that you can reply to. Okay. All right. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. And I'll be posting the study guide later. Please note that some of the concepts we have not talked about yet, but we'll talk about next week. Okay. Okay, so that's self-efficacy, and I really want you to think about that. What your self-efficacy is in certain tasks and how it might generalize or how it might be very specific. At the end of the day, the take-home message for self-efficacy is if you believe you can do it, you can. Okay, pretty simple. You've heard that before, but guess what? There's a lot of empirical evidence behind it. Okay. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. This is really long, so feel free to just watch it in little spurts. You don't have to sit and watch it the whole time. You probably knew that, but I might suggest doing that. Okay, talk to you later.